Hi everybody. So what we want to do right now is there's been a lot of information in this module and we just want to do a quick little review of some of the key parts. Some of this might sound repetitive from some of the videos, but I just wanted to give you my take on it as well. And this would be a great video to sort of, after you do the homework assignments, come back and, wrap it up with, this video to review everything that we talked about. So, what is macroeconomics overall? So macroeconomics is the study of the large economy as a whole. I like to think of it as a 10,000 foot looking down on the economy to see as it functions as a whole. Instead of analyzing one consumer, we're obviously analyzing everyone. And where did this come from, this idea? Well, you might think that this has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, but it's not. It really, the field of macroeconomics has only been around since the Great Depression, because before that, people basically thought that, economies go down, then they go up, things go well, then they go bad, but everything balances out in the end. And what we found during the Great Depression was an extended period where no, the economy did not come back and balance itself out, and it created this new field to study why that happened and how maybe the government can get involved to sort of fix the economy. The government didn't understand how to fix a depressed economy with 25% unemployment, and macroeconomics was created to both measure the health of the whole economy and then guide the government policies to fix the problem. Just a little note, our depressed economy has 25% unemployment during the largest Great Depression in our history, and places like Zimbabwe currently have over 90% unemployment. So you can see that these things are not universal to countries. So this module was a lot about how you measure the macroeconomy. And so this should be review. If you think about the president's report card, these were the grades that we were giving them. And for all countries, there are three major economic goals: promoting economic growth, which is a growth in real GDP, limiting unemployment, and keeping prices stable, which is the same as limiting inflation. So let's look at the first goal of promoting economic growth. So we know that a country measures economic growth through GDP. And they measure all types of things, the government does: production, income, investments, and savings. But the most important measure is our overall production. And remember the definition. Gross domestic product is the dollar value, remember it's in dollars, of all final goods and services produced within a country's borders in 1 year. So there are some key aspects there. One, GDP is measured in dollars. Two, it does not count intermediate goods, right? Only the final goods. So when you buy a car, that counts towards GDP, but the production of the tires and the radio that went into the car and the engine, those do not count towards GDP. Only the final good, because all of it counts. And we're only measuring it over 1 year. So, what does GDP tell us? It can't tell us everything, and we're going to examine in a future slide what are some deficiencies of the GDP measure. But it tells us how we're doing financially as a country, and how can it do this? Well, we can compare it to previous years to see if there's growth. In this module we talked to you, how do you figure out the growth rate? We can compare policy changes, right? We can look at a tax cut and see, did GDP increase with that tax cut? We could watch an infrastructure package. If the government spends $1 trillion on infrastructure, what is happening to GDP? And we can compare to other countries, mostly through a measurement called GDP per capita, which we're going to talk about. So if you look at us compared to other countries, you can see that the entire European Union, which is many nations, has basically the same GDP in 2010 as the United States on our own. But again, we're going to look in a future slide at this doesn't quite tell all the story, because you can see that China is number 3, but China has 2 billion people, and the United States only has 350 million people. So even though those two numbers look fairly close to each other, the standard of living in China is not even close to the United States yet. You can see there at the bottom, these are the bottom countries on the list. And again, this is how much income, not even per person, how much income the entire nation together is creating. And these are some Pacific Islands, Nauru, and some others. So if you looked at world GDP distribution, you would see that some countries are incredibly bloated, like the United States, and parts of Europe, and others are incredibly small. Like, look how small South America, even as a continent, is. Here you can see India, and so forth. So if we just take the 2015 nominal GDP, again in 2015 dollars, you can see now that the discrepancy is quite big. This is why we are considered the richest country on earth. If every state, in fact, was compared to other countries, you could see that the state of California, just by itself, not as part of the United States, just by itself, has the same GDP as Brazil. The state of Texas has the same GDP as Australia, and so on and so forth. The state of New York has the same GDP as the entire country of Mexico. So you can see how we are the wealthiest country. We produce a lot of stuff. So we've gone through this before, but this is a good practice. Why don't you pause the video and try to do this to figure out how you measure growth from year to year. This is the percentage change in GDP. You take year 2 minus year 1 over year 1 and multiply it by 100. And if you do this, you should get, that is a 25% increase in GDP from 2008 to 2009. And if you do this one, you will get a 5% increase. So that's good practice. Make sure you pause the video and do that practice. So what's not included in GDP? This is important. Intermediate goods are not counted because of multiple counting. I already sort of discussed that idea, the price of a finished car, not the radio or the tires. Transactions that do not produce anything. So when you buy and sell a stock, you are changing ownership, but nothing has been produced. We do not count that towards GDP. When you buy or sell a home, nothing has been produced. Okay? Used goods are not counted because they were counted when they were first produced. And non-market activities, illegal drugs, gambling with your bookie, but also unpaid work. You know, housewives at home doing lots of unpaid work, stay-at-home dads, stay-at-home moms, you know, fixing up their houses. That does not count towards GDP. So we talked about this. There are two ways of calculating GDP. Earlier in the module, I really only focused on one, which was the expenditures approach. Remember, C plus I plus G plus net exports. All the spending on final goods and services is going to add up to your total GDP. But at the same time, every time you spend money, that is actually, in fact, someone else's income. And so you could also count people's income, you know, rent, profits, etc., and that could give you the same total. Both ways generate the same amount, since every dollar spent is a dollar of income. And you know, you can go back to the circular flow model from module 1, and you can see that, you know, you could either count goods and services and resources or wages, etc. So remember the 4 components of GDP. You have to know these going forward. Very, very important. You know, consumer spending, you go out, you buy a pizza, that's part of GDP. Investments, when businesses put money into their own business, you know, a farmer buys a tractor, you know, a horse farm buys a new trailer, that is an investment. Government spending, bombs and tanks, not Social Security. We'll talk about that in a second. And net exports, exports minus imports. The value of 3 Ford Focuses minus 2 Hondas. And there you have the equation. C plus I plus G plus NX. There you go. So what's included and what's not included? Pause the video and take a moment to calculate the final GDP and to decide what category each goes into. So go ahead and pause the video now. So you should have come out to a GDP of $7,125,010. $10 for movie tickets. In consumption, $5 million increase in defense expenditures. That's going to be government spending. Used economics textbook is not counted. Ford makes a new $2 million factory. That's going to be an investment because it's inside the United States. Obviously, the other two, Toyotas made in Mexico, are part of Mexico's GDP. Profits from selling stocks. Remember, nothing's produced. And so on and so forth. You can see the rest. This is a great example of how an application question related to GDP might go. So indicate whether each of the following is counted in the United States gross domestic product for the year 2006. The value of a used textbook, is that going to count through an online auction in 2006? Rent paid in 2006 by residents in an apartment building built in 2000. Commissions earned in 2006 by a stockbroker. And the values of automobiles produced in 2006 entirely in South Korea by a firm owned by United States citizens. So that would be like, you know, if it was a Ford factory but in South Korea. Let's see. So pause the video and see if you can come up with the answers for this one. The first one's easy. Used textbooks are not included. Rent is included in GDP because you're providing a service to someone. You're allowing them to use your place in exchange for the rent. The commission, this is a tough one. It does have to do with stocks, but it is included because this is a service. You're helping them buy the stock. It's not the actual purchase of the stock. And the last one is not included because it is produced within the borders of South Korea. So there are some problems with using GDP to measure the nation's standard of living, and there's this great video from Robert F. Kennedy that I'm going to post below. But that's a good review of what we should know for